Welcome back, everyone, to Today in Woburn's election series. Today, we are meeting with one of Woburn's two councilors at large, Bob Ferullo. Councilor Ferullo and fellow at large Councilor Rob Toro do not have any opponents this year. Before we get started, Bob, would you mind sharing with us what the difference between a ward councilor and a councilor at large is?
Well, a ward councilor has a specific set of constituents that represents a single ward within the city. A councilor at large, myself and councilor at large Toro, uh, we represent the entire community to support the individual ward councilors with specific issues and to be available as another set of ears to hear from the constituents. So we represent across the entire city, whereas a ward councilor has a specific responsibility to a ward within the city.
Thank you. And so you're running unopposed this year, and I believe you've been on for a couple of terms. What's motivating you to continue serving on the city council?
Well, as you're aware, I have served the city since May 18th, 1980. I was sworn in as a police officer. And I have served the city 38 years within the Woburn Police Department, retiring in November of 2018, just to move on to other opportunities. It was the day before I turned 60 years old. I was done being the chief of police, but I was not done with this community. I spent my entire adult life serving this community. And the opportunity popped up in early 2019 where Representative Haggerty was moved on to the State House, and that left an open seat on the City Council. I was initially appointed for a partial term in 2019, and I was reelected in 19, 21, and 23, and I'm running again unopposed in 2025.
Great. And so you're going to be elected. What are your top priorities for the upcoming term?
Well, I think to enhance communication within the community, we've changed. Um, I graduated from Woburn High School in 1976, and here we are almost 50 years later. And the city's not the same city that I graduated from the high school. We welcome the change, we welcome the influx of new residents, but the city needs to change to keep up with those new residents. I think we need to respect the institution of the city of Woburn. We need to respect the old saying, Tana Pride and Black and Orange. However, we need to grow forward to change as the community that we're changing. I think we can do a better job communicating, A, with our constituents, but B, I think we can do a better job communicating across the operating departments within the city of Woburn. Um, I think we need to work more collaboratively with the school department. I think we need to approach individual projects with enthusiasm, but it needs to be fiscally prudent enthusiasm. So I think we need to, save the castle, build the schools, fix the roads, put up the street lights, put up the crosswalks. That's all nice, but everything comes with a price tag. So I think we need to be able to work together to find a happy medium that we can afford, that will make the necessary improvements. Uh, so I think that's it. Smart growth is another issue. Um, we had an opportunity at the Showcase Cinema lot to build a small biotech campus. And we went through the motions to do that, and the company left us. And we now are facing a Home Depot complex going into the Showcase Cinema. I think we need to look at the opportunities, weigh them when they're in front of us, and move forward to make those smart opportunities happen. Um, I'm excited about the growth in the northeast part of the city, where I grew up. The new Boston Street Bridge is opening, but there's a huge amount of residential growth up there. There's also a huge amount of industrial growth. We need to learn to manage where we're going. And I think we need to do a better job explaining to the citizens what the true issues are. And I think one of the ways to do that, when I get the emails talking about anything, I won't use the word complaining, but raising the issues, rather than get an email battle, I pick up my phone and I call the constituent and I talk through all sides. Um, I don't think it's a win-lose situation when you talk to the constituents. I think it's a matter of explanation. And I look at one of the largest unions in the city had labor issues 2 years ago. Um, I got bombarded with emails and then ultimately bombarded with phone calls. And when people would call, or constituents or union members would call, because my personal cell phone was given out by the union, um, when they would call me, they would start to read a statement that everybody read the same statement. And I'd ask them to please stop reading the statement and let's talk about the issues. So I think that's what we need to do. We need to do a better job talking about the issues. I'm thrilled with the team that we have on the city council now. We're going to have, a new alderman and alderperson in Ward 1 and a new alderman in Ward 1. But I like to work with the different people. My institutional knowledge of the city, I was 21 years old when I first started to work for the city. I will be 67 years old next month. My institutional knowledge of where we've been, the roads we've traveled, and the things we've done together, I think that that's a priority to share the thoughts of where we've been. I think another thing that is beneficial to me and is one of my priorities is I spent my life on the streets and the neighborhoods of the city. That was my job, to share the culture and the personality of each neighborhood, to address the issues. And I think that, I'm excited about that. I think we need to look at traffic. We need to do a traffic, focus on traffic, um, address the issues in a fair and impartial manner. I think we need to continue to focus on the expansion that we have left. I mean, what are we doing up in the North Woburn area? Focus on Anderson Transportation Station Center, and do things like that.
Thank you. What's something happening in the city that you feel more people should know about?
Um, all sorts of things. I think the growth. I think a true understanding of the growth. Um, we a true understanding of the growth. Why the decisions are made that we make and how we make them. And people see a snippet of uh, what goes on in the city council meeting. Somebody comes before us and does a 15-minute presentation, and they put up some boards and they show us, and then all of a sudden we vote yes or no or send it to committee. That 15 minutes, before to get to that 15 minutes, is hours and hours and hours of site visits and discussions with the attorneys, not as a whole, but as individuals. So if they were to take a piece of land and want to develop a piece of land, the developer would approach the mayor's office or the planning board and start the discussion. If it's in Ward, 6, they'd go see Councilor DeMambro and he'd go visit the site and he'd say, hey, do you guys want to come with us? We can't go in groups of greater than 3, so we don't violate public meeting laws, but we'll go and we'll visit a site. We'll talk about the site. We'll also talk about the alternatives. And, the developer may say, we'd like to put in, a 6-story apartment building with 150 units. They'll all be 1 and 2 bedroom units, is not to foster, growth on the school. If this fails, what we want to do is put in a trucking terminal, that Amazon's going to deliver packages 24 hours a day to the trucking terminal. And that's just an example. That's a made up example. But, I think that what goes into making, what's in the recipe to make the decisions, and why sometimes we can't. And, if you look at uh, traffic control or crosswalks, sidewalks, I want a crosswalk here. There's parameters to put in a crosswalk. You have line of sight issues, you have speed issues, you have corner issues. And it's not just a matter of painting 2 white lines. Whenever we put in a new crosswalk, they have to be American with Disability Act accessible. So we need to put in wheelchair ramps, or hand accessible ramps. We need to rebuild the sidewalk where the crosswalk's going to land. And the crosswalk has to land somewhere. It's not just draw 2 stripes across a road and say that's a crosswalk. So, how we make the decisions. I urge people to, get involved, come to the city council meetings. There are two unique people, and I won't use their name just out of respect to their privacy. There's two folks that bought a house on Bennett Street, and they moved here from out of town, Somerville, Cambridge, wherever they moved from. And they started to show up at the city council meetings. Um, and they engage, not with, fist pounding. They come in and they talk about the city that they've chosen to put their roots in. And they care about the city. I'd love more people to come down and engage. And it's listen to what we do. Ask the questions about how we make decisions. I'm criticized often by my wife for not talking enough in the city council meetings. I make tons of phone calls. I'll talk to anybody that calls me. And even though we have very limited control or input into what goes on in the schools, I probably have 20 new friends or 20 new constituent acquaintances talking about issues, redistricting, playground accessibility, a new roof for the Shamrock School, a fire station going into the west side. So I'll get this 3-paragraph email, and 10 minutes after they hit send, I call them. And, we talk about stuff. So, I mean, to engage in how the decisions are made. We had a tough one up in Central Square that, that whole development. I've done a lot of work with Mr. Tachi when I was the police chief. He put a lot of heart into that development, and he got killed. But there'll be another development coming along, or something else will happen to that property. We need to learn to work better with the constituents.
Thank you. And I think you brought up a few different things, but what feedback, I'm sorry, what's one challenge that keeps coming up in your conversations with residents? So you're talking to folks a lot, you're getting emails, but when you're talking to them, what's the themes that are coming up?
Well, I mean, I want to talk about the castle, so this would be a great place to talk about the castle. You have people that don't live in Central Square that I can't repeat what they say about the castle because they don't care about the castle. You have people from that area. That castle is emotionally important, physically important. It's history for the city. And my grandmother lived where True Place is now. She had this beautiful old Victorian house that was where Main Street is now. So if you're coming down south on Main Street around the Rotary, where you bear right to go further south down on Main Street, that was my grandmother's house. They took that house when they did it. So I grew up, my grandmother grew up in Central Square. My dad grew up in Central Square. I used to go visit my grandmother and walk, down to the castle and, get an ice cream and do things like that. I care about the castle, but at what expense do we care about the castle? And I think that, we want to make that work. I want nothing more than to save the castle and make it look pretty again and make it be a historical site or a museum but it has to be functional. The cost of the castle. And it's not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. It's many $1 million to save the castle. So that's a consistent discussion. Another consistent discussion is the schools. And I think we go back to where I started: communication, trust, and respect with the school department. I'm working on it. I spent a very meaningful 3 hours with Assistant Superintendent Maureen Ryan the other day, visiting the special education classes across the platform of the Woburn school system. It was eye-opening for me. They need facilities. They need an early childhood center. They need to replace the Alta Vista School. We need to upgrade the 2 middle schools. We need to maintain the facilities that we have. Now we've gone from tens of millions to hundreds of millions. And 73% of the households in Woburn do not have children in the Woburn school system. So we need to sit and talk, and we need to check our egos and attitudes at the door, and we need to talk about how are we going to move forward in order to keep Woburn a livable place. One of those answers, in part, is to continue smart industrial growth and support the tax burden, spread it across industry. And we need to look at how we're doing that. So those are 2 physical structures. The other thing is traffic. And once a month we get a request: I want residents only on my street. There's a street right behind me where I live in Central Square. Both ends are do not enter 4 to 6. So if you live on that street, how do you get there? You can't. We need to look at smart growth. All of our traffic signalization it's a national traffic standard. You need to live by the rules. And we need to work on traffic. How does traffic work? Um, Part of the big concern over on the west side with the fire station is traffic impact. That right now, when the fire truck goes out, he can go left or right and hit or not hit the traffic lights. When they come out of the proposed site at the Reeve School, there's a little bit of left that's still left in Woburn, but the majority of those turns are going to be right, and they're going to go into that very busy intersection. We need to look at that stuff. We don't make decisions based upon emotion. We make decisions based upon best practice, engineering studies, and the National Transportation Safety Bureau traffic standards. We look at, that's something that I hear consistently. Um, Another thing is traffic enforcement. Um, Waze, or I'll use Waze, the traffic routing system. If you're on 128 northbound in Burlington, headed toward Stoneham or Reading, that direction, when 128 backs up, the traffic management programs take you off of 128, you take a right on Wynn Street, you take a left on Wyman Street, you go up Eaton Avenue, you take a left on Mishram Road, you take a right on Olympia Avenue, and it puts you back on the highway up by Colts. There's nothing we can do about that. But it crushes the traffic. It has nothing to do with residents in Woburn. It has nothing to do with industry in Woburn. It has nothing to do with growth in Woburn. It has to do with 128. Those are things that we need to work on. Chief McManus, and prior to Chief McManus, Chief Rufo, did a phenomenal job in traffic enforcement on Wyman Street. Right at the end of my street, the traffic bureau sits there every night from 4 to 6. And they do it because it's a huge cut through. It's a huge cut through. That's something that we always hear about. Whatever the issue is. And some people have constructive ideas. Other people, just sort of pound us a little.
So, in thinking about smart growth and some of the different ideas that you've talked about, what's one area where you feel Woburn could take a bold step forward, and what would it take to get there?
This is not going to gain me any friends. I think we need to look at the truck routes in the city of Woburn. And I know this from my previous career. If you get off 128 going south on Main Street, so get off 128 and drive south on Main Street, where is the first place with a truck you can take a left? Can you think of it?
No.
It's Salem Street. So every street on the left, going left, south on Main Street, is restricted to truck traffic. So we force every big truck that comes into the city to drive to Salem Street. Do I have an answer? I really don't, but we have to look at that. If you get off Route 93 with a truck after 8 o'clock at night, where's the first right that you can take legally?
Is it Washington Street?
Nope. Washington Street's closed to truck traffic after 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock.
I don't
And so you
know.
have to go all the way to Main Street on Montville Avenue to take a right.
And then you're in the Rotary.
Then you're in the Rotary.
Oof.
And that's where traffic, and that's from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., I think. You can't take a right on Washington. You can't take a right on Central. The Henry Paul streets, you can't take a right on. You can't take a right on Wood Street. You can't take a right on Bow Street. You don't have no desire, you can't go down Campbell Street. There's nowhere to go. So you end up in Woburn Square. And, those are things we need to look at. Do I have an answer? Absolutely not. All my years of wisdom, I don't have an answer for that. But I mean, that's where we force the traffic into the square. The other thing I think we need to look at, and Mayor Concanon has a great, proposal that's being funded by the state, is Woburn Square Rotary. The reason there's so many crashes, it's the only place, or not the only place, but it's very unusual at a Rotary to not have the Rotary have the right of way. It's truly not a Rotary. I mean, at Pleasant and Wynn, at Gallagher Place in Pleasant Street. At Main, it's light controlled at Main, but the entering traffic has the right of way, and that's an issue. On that, I mean, on that subject, the engineering department is doing a great job enhancing the traffic control in the city, where the cameras on top of the traffic, they're not video cameras like we're on now. They're motion cameras. They see a car and change the light. So they monitor traffic, but not visually monitor traffic. They monitor traffic flow. Um, they just expanded at Pleasant and Arlington within the last year or two. The left turn, that you can now take a left turn onto Arlington Street with an assisted light. There's a left arrow. They're doing a great job, the engineering department and the fire department, and managing the lights to do that kind of stuff. Um,
Thank you. So I'm going to ask one more question before we let you go. How would you measure success as a counselor and for the council as a whole?
I think it's communication. We have to make unpopular decisions, and those decisions need to be made. Um, I think we need to communicate, and we're working. I've been around the demographic, or the camaraderie, or the commitment of these counselors. Alderman DeMambro, he knows every little nuance up in North Woburn. I mean, Darlene Mercer Bruin, she's been there for 18 years, I think, 16, 18 years. She knows everybody. So I think we need to not work, we need to enhance our communication. My I have an office in my house. The phone number is 781-281-1403, and it forwards to my cell phone, and I'll answer the cell phone from anybody that wants to talk about anything. I may not have the answer they want, or I may not have an answer at all, but I'll get them one, and I'll tell them the logic behind it all. And some people agree, some people don't. But if you explain why you're doing what you do, you're much better off. Um, you know, why we're doing what we do, you're much better off. The city's growing tremendously. The support of the administration in growing public safety, growing public works, growing the fire department, the police department, interagency communication. They're doing great stuff. Um, they're doing great stuff. And we just need to be able to communicate it. And we need to build the trust with our constituents. We need to build the trust with the constituents. And then I think we need to take some of our emotion out of our decisions, and we need to make our decisions based upon consistent facts, laws, and city charter and city ordinances and things like that. But I think to be able to talk to people, um, I mean, you're part of the DNA of the city. You've been around, you're part of the DNA of the city, and we need more people like you to do things like this to help us communicate. Um,
Well, thank you, Bob. Before we let you go, is there anything else you'd like to share with the voters before Election Day?
no, I mean, it's been my privilege. It's been my privilege to serve this city for um, almost well into the 40 years. It's for 45 years, over 5 decades. And I'm privileged to have the opportunity to continue to do so. Um, and if it's time for me to leave, they'll tell me it's time for me to leave. But I continue to be there. It's a privilege. It's a privilege to go to Flag Day. It's a privilege, to partner with the new staff at the library. It's a privilege to at the city council, we have the Challenger Baseball League in front of us to act like to interact with the other special interest groups. And after my time with Superintendent Ryan in the last couple of weeks, I'm really committed to working with the schools to find a mutually acceptable resolution that's fiscally responsible for the city. Um, but I'm excited to enter now with part of my fifth term, fourth term, however you want to count the first one, uh, and to continue to serve the city.
Bob, thanks so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. It was great hearing your perspective as a counselor at large. We will let everybody go. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.